Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Paperback Possibility Podcast with your hosts, Ashley
and Alfie.
And today we are going to be talking about our May read, which was Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I believe is how you pronounce her name, but tell me if I am wrong. But we're very excited today because we have a very differing of opinion again.
Get more different.
We have a very differing opinion, to say the very least. And I'm excited to share some of that with you. But we're gonna start off, as we always do, the podcast. We have a little bit of a chat about the book. Then we dive into spoilers territory, which is where we talk about the book No Holds Barred. So if you do want to read the book, that's where you need to stop, go read, and come back. I usually do the intros. I'm very lost.
I haven't done the intro in a while. I feel like it's been ages since we did a podcast.
It has. It feels like it's been so long. And we did 2 last month as well. So I don't know why it feels like it's been so long.
We did 2 back to back and then haven't done one for like over a month.
Some key points about Deadly Education before we start. It's a book that captured our attention. We were in a local Waterstones. We were walking around and we saw the book.
Oh, yes. I forgot that's how we found it.
And I read out the back of it to Alfie, who was like, that sounds incredible.
Yeah, I thought it sounded very good.
I'll read the back of it to you now. This is the blurb. Enter a school of magic unlike any you have ever encountered. There are no teachers, no holidays, friendships are purely strategic, and the odds of survival are never equal. Once you're inside, there are only 2 ways out. You graduate or you die. Elle Higgins is uniquely prepared for the school's many dangers. She may be without allies, but she possesses a dark power strong enough to level mountains and wipe out untold millions. Never mind easily destroy the countless monsters that prowl the school. Except, she might accidentally kill all the other students too. So Elle is trying her hardest not to use it. That is, unless she has no other choice. The first line of that, brilliant. So good, and I think that's probably what I read out to you, and you were like, "Yeah, that's it. That's what I want to have as an option."
I do really like the no teachers, no holidays, friendships and stuff. I like that concept, and that does come through well in the book. But for me, this book did not live up to any kind of hype that I put onto it.
It's $3.99 on Kindle at the moment, which is I think the price we bought it for. I don't feel like it was worth more than that. I don't feel like it was necessarily worth less. I think that that's pretty good. It rates at 4.5 stars on Amazon as well. And it's 318 pages. I will say it was a hard 318 pages.
That is a long 318 pages.
It felt like I was thinking it was like closer to 400.
I felt like it was 1,000.
Let me tell you a little bit about Naomi Novik as well. She's an American author, which is a little bit strange, but we'll get onto that in a little bit.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
No,
actually.
Exactly.
Which might explain a few things that I didn't love about the book.
She has written a fantasy series before called Temeraire, I think it's called, which is probably more your speed, just the way it sounds. I can't remember what it's about in total.
The sound of that word.
But she has also written standalone fantasy novels based on Rumpelstiltskin and other Polish folklore as well. So, yeah. Yeah. So, firstly,
bizarre.
We dive into the book. Naomi Novik, American author. Our main character is half Welsh and half Indian.
Yes. Yeah, I think it is explicitly stated that she is half Indian.
Yes. She lives in Wales in her day-to-day.
Is Indian, I think, and her mum was Welsh.
Also, something to note, and I don't know if this is going to mean anything to you, but Naomi Novik is a co-founder of AO3, which is a fan fiction website.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I recognise AO3 as like a classroom number or something.
No, it stands for, I'm just going to Google this while we're here, Archive of Our Own.
Right.
And it's where you basically...
That's interesting.
Oh, the top one.
Yeah, because I felt... Right, so we're looking at this page right now, and AO3, and one of the first things that have come up as Google like suggests sub-pages on that particular website, one of them is Harry Potter fan fiction. And I felt that quite strongly reading this book. So I don't know if that's really where Naomi Novik got her inspiration, but it does feel like I'm going to do Harry Potter but turn it on its head kind of thing.
So before the podcast, I looked up some reviews on Amazon, and a lot of the more negative ones said it was like someone tried to make Harry Potter gritty
Yes. Oh, I completely agree with that.
and failed.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I might have written that review. I didn't really. I would have. That's pretty much exactly what I would say about it.
There was a little bit of controversy with this book.
Mm-hmm.
When it was released, it was immediately facing criticism. Racism? Not because of Elle's race, as far as I'm aware. It was actually because Naomi Novik wrote a passage in this book where she described a hairstyle known as dreadlocks. So she used the term dreadlocks as well, which I don't know, but I feel like we're not using dreadlocks anymore. It's locks. We're like taking the dread out of it because they're not dreadful. It's a hairstyle. It's a very good hairstyle.
No clue.
But she wrote in the passage is the dreadlocks are susceptible to an infestation of bug-like magical creatures, and that just filled out so many different stereotypes of dreadlocks in afro-textured hair like throughout the years. So immediately that sent some like big no sirens going off. But since then, I don't know if this makes it better, but she did revise the passage for future reprints and promised that the sequel novels will not be sent to reviewers and publishers before revisions are fully complete and a final sensitivity read has happened. Which I do think is important, especially if she, as far as I'm aware, Naomi Novik she's not any part Indian as well.
No, I thought that, and I think we should just point out as well if anybody is questioning, we're talking about Indian as in from India, the country, not Indian as in the old phrase used to describe Native Americans.
Yes, yeah. So she is like South Asian Indian. Yeah. I think that what Naomi Novik does that is very good and bad, but very good, is she has like throughout the book there is a whole massive range of diverse characters, and it's like she's got friends from literally all over the world.
Yeah, because it's only this school. It's from
I think
it's like
so.
This school is it for like all wizards and witches and stuff around the world, magically inclined humans. It's just this school.
The premise is that this school is a place to protect the children.
Yeah.
And I think Elle is 14 or 15. I think 14 when we start the book, and Orion, who is another one of the main characters, is 16. And then you graduate at 17, 18. Yeah. But what it seems is when you're out in the real world, you are targeted as soon as you sort of become of age and start experiencing your magic a bit more. You're targeted by these magical creatures. We'll get onto this, but those creatures...
Gosh, so bad. I hated this part of it. It's so confusing unnecessarily.
These creatures basically go and find the children. They put the families at risk as well. So in order to combat this, around the age of like 14, when they start having these sort of like magical feelings, they send all of the children to this school, which is called the Scholomance. And the whole trilogy is out. It's published already. There's, I think the first one was 2020, the second one was 2021, and the third one was 2022. So I don't know, but I get the sense that it was written in full before it was published.
Knew it. Yeah, she knew where it was going.
Yeah, which is interesting as to your point on the political side of things. The first book isn't hugely political, but as Elle is navigating this school, there's sort of like an underlying storyline of you need to make friends with someone so that you can join their enclave. And the enclave is basically this group that is based in New York or London or other kinds of cities. There is like a small Welsh one as well, I think, that's not too far away from Elle.
Yeah.
But in order to essentially survive as a magical person out in the world, the real world, not school, you need to be in one of these enclaves because they all look after each other in those places. Elle is a very interesting choice for a main character in the sense that she is incredibly unlikable.
Just awful. Just a terrible person.
I would say to start with, because this differs between us again, but Elle hugely grew on me, and enough so, I will say at this point in the podcast, I I was going to buy the second book before Mike, one of the listeners of the channel, one of my very good friends, gifted me the book. So the second one in the series, I do have it. I haven't read it yet because I wanted to do this podcast first. But I'm actually very, very much looking forward to it. So I did go from like hating it. It took me so long to get into it. And I think it was around 48% of the book, because we Kindle read it. I was like, right, that's it. I'm sold. I'm in. But Naomi Novik makes it incredibly difficult to get to that point. She uses so much language. And this is like I don't read a lot of fantasy books because I can't get my head around this in a lot of places.
Yeah.
When you go into a book, I want to be brought into the book. This book is like, you are slammed in and you're like, right, well, this is a word I use, this is a word I use, this is a word I use. You've never heard of these words before, but you are expected to know what they mean.
Oh, God.
And
it's a nightmare.
I struggle with that immensely. For example, one of the... Oh, am I going to remember what all of the words are? The magic isn't called magic.
They just say they're words.
Yeah, they're all MA words. Yeah. It's Malia, I think, or Malia.
Yeah.
There's another term.
So there's mana, which is like real magic.
Oh yeah, mana.
That you draw from crystals or whatever. There's Malia, which is like blood magic, which you draw from the life force of living beings. And I think it specifically has to be magical beings, like magical people, not just like magical monsters. It has to be people. Then there's Mals, who are monsters in the magical world. Then there's Maleficers or Maleficers, who are people who use Malia to use their magic. So if you use Malia and drain magic from someone else, you are a Maleficer or Maleficer. And I'm pretty sure there's like 2 or 3 more that I've forgotten.
Yeah.
But Jesus Christ, as a reader, I was just like, and these words are just thrown like sentence after sentence, and it is impossible to keep up with what is what. I spent the whole time. I think I was about 40% of the way through before I like asked you, and I was like, "What is a? Can you just tell me what a mal is?" Because I'm thinking that a mal and a maleficer are the same. Because in linguistic speak, that just makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Mal would be short for maleficer, but they're 2 completely different things. If you want it to be 2 completely different things, just use another word. Make it mallets or mallows or something. If you want that to be the monsters, don't make it maleficers and mals and malia and put them in, and they're all 3 different things. I know that she thinks she was being really clever in like etymology and being like, oh, the root word is magic or the root word is mal or whatever, but God, it was driving me insane, and the characters are so unlikable anyway, and the words that she uses are so difficult to read, and it's just, it's like she wrote a book that she specifically didn't want me to read, and was trying to stop me from reading it every turn. I did finish it, which I'm very proud of myself for doing, but good Lord, I did not have a good time.
I thought genuinely you were going to DNF it.
Yeah, I did multiple points. I was like, I don't know if I can do it. I genuinely don't know if I can finish it. I did though.
I'm really glad you did. I ended up getting to 50%, I think, before you'd even started the book. And then I read through to the end before you were at 50%, which is why at 40%, Alfie turned to me and went, explain this book to me. Tell me everything. But I actually, by the end of the book, felt like I was in a very capable position to explain those things to you.
Yeah.
I really liked it overall. To give it like a brief overview of the story, and sort of verging into light spoilers, so just keep that in mind. Elle, the main character, she lives in this Welsh sort of encampment. What is it called? They called it something. Commune. Her mum is this mega powerful witch, but
like famously mega powerful. Like everyone knows who this woman is.
If Elle let on to these people at the school who her mum was, she'd be into these enclaves without like a shadow of a doubt. But for some reason, she, as much as she does want to get into the enclaves, she doesn't really want to admit it, and therefore
so annoying. Such an annoying character.
And therefore, she won't like do anything to help her case.
And there's no reason for her not to do that. She doesn't give like a genuine, believable reason. It's literally just because she's just bitter about the fact that her mum is just such a nice person.
Yeah, I
and
think that is,
everyone loves her, and everyone loves her mum, and and Elle just grew up just like resenting the fact that her mum was like a nice person, and then decided that she wanted to like. It's just oh god, it's just the constant, just like it's the conscious decision to self-destruct.
Yeah, every
at
turn.
At every turn, for no reason other than you're just a bit spiteful about the fact that everyone likes your mum.
Yeah. She goes to this school.
Oh god. Yeah.
And we start off, I think she's already been there for a while. Like, she knows how the school works.
Yeah, I think she's been there for at least a year, maybe 2.
Like,
she's not fresh.
She deeply knows how this school works. I think, is she in year 2? She might be in year 2.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And sorry, it has been a little while since I finished reading the book because we
It took me
had
about
to
4
wait
years to read
it. We had to wait for Alfie to read it, and then like we needed to wait to film the podcast. So it's been like a substantial gap. But Elle goes to the school. There's a child there, a teenager called Orion. Orion
her elder
is he's like, I think, a little bit of the heartthrob hero of the school.
Yeah, he's your classic like quarterback, sort of like the guy everyone loves.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks he's just the bee's knees.
You want to be with him or you want to be him, and you're not sure which one it is.
Yeah.
He is at the school. He saves Elle a couple of times.
That's how the book starts, by the way.
Yeah,
with him saving her life, and of course she's just like, oh, I just hate this guy.
Yeah, how dare you?
How dare you
me?
save my life? And immediately I'm like, oh, shut.
So Elle and Orion sort of become friends because Elle is very reluctant to be saved, but Orion for some reason can't work out why that is and sticks around. But also Orion's friend Louise has disappeared, and because of Elle's sort of spiky nature, he's like, well, maybe she had something to do with it.
Yeah, I feel like it was something like Orion wasn't. Did Orion already suspect what had happened at that point? Or was he? Yeah, so I think he. Is this a spoiler? Can I get into this yet? Do you think? It's very early on. It's literally like the first.
If it's in the first,
act.
like.
Orion suspects that Elle is a maleficer.
Yes.
Because she was close to Louise. Or like, when I say close, she was in close proximity to Louise.
Yeah.
Like, she's literally like 2 rooms down. Louise has disappeared. Orion thinks, well, it could have been you because everybody hates you and you hate everybody. So if anyone's going to be a maleficer, it could be you, and you might have killed her. So I'm just going to hang around and just see what's up. But Orion is such a nice guy that when he sees that she's in danger, he goes and saves her anyway.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how their relationship forms. And Orion is still very suspicious of her, so he hangs around her to make sure what's going on. But Elle is just like, oh, just leave me alone, you weirdo.
Yeah. Throughout the course of the book, they become closer friends. There's like a little hint of a romance set up towards the end as well, but it's so hinted at, I can't even go into that.
I would say that it's not even hinted. I think it's very explicit.
Do you think?
The romance, yeah. It's not like...
Oh, to be fair, okay, we'll get into it towards the end.
Yeah.
But no, you are right. But there is a romance set up between 2 of the main characters, who we may or may not have already mentioned. But because Orion, this wonder kid, is hanging around Elle so much, everyone else starts hanging around Elle.
Yeah.
And she's battling with this whole, like, why do they want to be with me? Like, I'm so detestable. I'm such a horrible person. But the thing is, she's really giving us no indication that she is that. She just seems to be quite spiteful of herself and her upbringing. And her dad's not in the picture. And we find out why as we go into the book. But she just grew up with her mum. And because Elle is a maleficer...
She is, yes.
She expresses this a bit early as well.
Yeah, that's pretty early on that we learn about that.
But this is why the book is so confusing. I'm trying so hard to get through like the outline of this book. But there's so many like caveats and things I need to be like, well, you need to know this if you're going to need to like know the next bit.
Yeah, oh god, it's so annoying.
The thing is about Elle, she is a maleficer. Maleficers use Malia, which is what Alfie was talking about, is the life force of another being.
Of another magical person.
We think it's magical.
I think it is. I don't think there's any explicit mention of it being non-magical people. And one would assume that it was magical people, otherwise...
No.
why are there not Maleficers running around the whole of the world killing people?
Because that's a very good question. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's just magical beings. The book goes on. Elle is battling these powers because she basically, as a Maleficer, needs to use Malia in order to use her powers. But she doesn't want to do that because she doesn't want to take the life force out of anything. So she uses...
Because underneath, she's actually a nice person.
Yeah, she's a nice person. And...
If you've ever met or been a moody teenager who literally just hates the world for the sake of it, that's what Elle is.
But she is 14.
I know, and that's who she is. But if you... there's a reason that teenagers are so annoying, and it's because they're like this. And like, oh God, the whole way through the book, I was just like, oh, just shut up. Just stop talking to me. The book is also written in first person.
Yes.
I actually think I would have gotten along a lot more with this book if I wasn't in Elle's head the whole time. If I could have been separate from Elle and watched Elle, I'd have been like, okay, well, you are somewhat interesting. You're a teenager who's going through stuff, and and you're dealing with this life of yours, and that's how it is. But it's like she's just like chomping in your ear the whole book, are just about how horrible everyone is and how horrible she is and how there's no hope. And it's just like, oh my God, just stop talking to me.
It's okay.
Just stop talking
Take a deep
to
breath.
me.
It's okay. We go into this school and we're being saved from everything all the time because these Mals, these creatures of like darkness,
Not short for Maleficer.
not sure for Maleficers, are coming out of like every corner. They're in the scrambled eggs, they're in the vents, they're under the bed. They're like literally everywhere you can find them, which is why
They come
Orion's
out of the
like
sink. They like
Literally.
literally all sorts.
And there are so many like really nice touches to this book that I like the fact there aren't any teachers, so they have to post their tests through like a little letterbox on the desk.
Yeah, like a magical letterbox.
But they have to be really careful because there might be a Mal in there. So there are Mals everywhere in the school, and what transpires is, again, verging in spoilers, what transpires is these Mals have got into the school and they're not supposed to be there. When the school was built, it was to protect these children from the outside world and from the Mals. And basically, after, I think the first year is what they talked about. After the first year or so, this completely broke down and this was not a thing that was working anymore. The school is also set out like you do the whole school and then towards the end, you graduate and you go through this graduation hall and leave. You don't go into the graduation hall unless you're graduating, and that's the only way out of the school. I don't know how you get in. I've forgotten. I'm sure she talks about it because she covers everything.
You go in with like a cohort, like a whole bunch of students come in at the same time.
Yeah,
It's that I think you all just get like magically teleported there.
Probably.
But the school doesn't actually exist like in the real world. It exists
in a void.
In the void, yeah.
And this is talked about a lot as well because like all the gaps in like the school and stuff like that are the void. And you can see the void. If you go into the void, you're going to come out with your mind a bit mangled.
Yeah.
And people have gone in to try and escape the school and not...
They either come back straight away because they're too afraid of the void, or they come back a little bit later and they're just completely mad.
Yeah, it's
like
gone.
They've completely lost their minds.
So we go through this graduation hall to leave. We find out that's where a lot of the Mals are sort of based and where they start because of something that's gone wrong with the school. And Elle, as she becomes more friendly with everyone in here, they need to work out how to destroy the Mals in this graduation hall to make sure that the class that is graduating that year can go through. And when they eventually get around to it, it's going to be easier to go through because there'll be less Mals to fight off. That we'll talk about later. For now, all you need to know is that's the sort of like main outline of the storyline. There are a lot of diverse characters. They are from all sorts of places from around the world. They have names that are suited to those countries as well.
Yeah.
So they are very good 2D placeholder characters.
Yeah.
There's nothing really that sets them apart from the two best friends. I feel like they're a bit fleshed out. Not massively, but they're a bit fleshed out.
I'd say one in particular is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you, like me, struggling to remember their names right now?
I know the one that I'm thinking of.
What friend are you thinking of?
Liu?
Oh, yeah. So We should have learned how to pronounce this before the start of the stream, but it's Liu, like Liu.
I'd say Liu or maybe Lou or Liu. I don't know.
She is another character that we learn a lot about. She becomes close to Elle first, and they sort of have like a bond of, again, what they talked about in the blurb is you have to have these bonds to
Alliances.
to make sure that you don't die. Like, so someone's always watching your back.
I just would like to point out another thing that I really don't like about this book is nobody seems to die a lot. Like, you'd think the amount of like danger that's present in this school, you'd think that kids would just be dying left and right, but I never really got that sense. And I think it's because Elle describes everything with such cold, it's just how it is kind of thing. You feel like everyone in the school thinks like that. There's a specific scene when Orion he needs to fight Amal for whatever reason, and he literally just goes up to in the dinner hall where everyone's eating, he just like stands on the table and just bashes the ceiling until the tile comes loose and Amal drops out, and everyone's just like watching, just like this is just happening.
Yeah.
And it just feels so like the characters are as bored as I am with everything that's going on. Like, the characters are just like, oh, there's a monster there. And Orion comes in, he punches it until it's dead, and everyone's like, cool.
I think there is a bit of merit to that, in the sense that you're meant to feel like it's a part of everyday life. You're meant to have that feeling. But I also understand your point of view in that it just feels bored. If you take
the conflict of the story and the environment and you make that boring, what's left? You know, what's the point of this? If it was like, there's a scene in a library later on, that's the scene that I think you were like, once that happened, you were like, oh, I'm much more on board here. I read that scene and was like, that's a very good scene, because it felt tangible. It felt like something was actually happening. The rest of the book, I never felt like anything was happening. And as I was reading it, I think I asked you like multiple times, I don't really understand what's going on, because everything is told with such like blah blah, and it's just like that the whole way through the book, apart from this one scene and the ending, which is like, it's like there's panic and there's fear and there's tension and there's, you know, I might actually die now, and it's like, oh, what now, and then we're back to blah, blah, blah. I was just like, nothing is happening in this story. Like, a chapter would end, like they always tell you this in like literature and even in like film studies, which is what I did. Like, they always tell you, like, every time you finish a scene or a chapter, like, you have to kind of set up the next thing that's going to happen. I never felt like that in this book. I felt like I read a chapter, nothing happened, and then the start of the next chapter started, and it was like the last chapter hadn't really even happened. They were just going to lunch again, and Elle was just whinging at Orion and saying like, oh yeah, I don't like you. You never leave me alone, but you do all these nice things to me. And Orion's just like, I don't understand you, Elle. Like, I'm so nice to you, but you hate me. And all the other people are just like, well, I don't like that Elle person, but she's hanging out with Orion, so we better keep her on side. And I swear that's how like there's only like 13 chapters, and I think that's how like 7 of them start, and I think that's also how like 7 of them end, and it just so boring. It's genuinely one of the most boring books I've ever read.
So I hate to ask this question before we get into spoiler territory. What would you rate it?
1 star. If that is at the minimum.
Yeah.
1 star. 1 star. I think it was boring. I thought the characters were completely unlikable. I thought the world design was laughably bad, because there's no sense to it. I know that there is sense to it, but the sense is so misguided that like it doesn't make any sense. One of your notes here that I'm looking at, you have you have the word info dumping, and oh my god, is this book so guilty of just massive info dumping for no reason. Like, the chapters are like 20 pages each, which is, in my opinion, 10 being like where a chapter usually 10 pages, 20 pages, that's a long chapter. I would say 10 to 13 pages of each chapter is spelled just info dumping about this world. And then 7 pages is just spent watching them eat dinner and just whinge about how terrible everything is. And it's just, oh god, it was awful. It was just so bad. It was just so bad. It was so bad. I hated this book. I never want to read it again. What would you rate it?
I'd give it a 3 star.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was okay. I think if one is like terrible DNF, 2 is, I don't know, 3 is average, it's okay. I could be persuaded to read the next one, but I could also leave it. 4 is like, yeah, I have pretty like good interest, pretty strong interest in reading the next one. I really enjoyed that book. And 5 being like, absolutely, it's not even a question, I'm reading the next one. And it doesn't have to be good book if it's a 5-star. It just has to be one that I align with 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a 5-star book is a book that I enjoyed reading.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
had a good time.
I think you say info dumping. I also say info dumping, but I do think it was a lore drop as well. Like if you look at it that way, it's a lore dump. So I feel like for me it's a 3-star because I could take it or leave it. But as I say to you, by the end of the book, I was very excited to read the next one. I was like, right, it's time. I'm ready to go. Now that it's been a little while, I probably could leave it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to because again, I have the copy of the book now. Thank you, Mike. But it's not my favourite. And before we get into spoiler territory, I have 2 lines from Amazon reviews that I want to share with you.
I love these. I've been looking at these the whole time.
Well, I did it to appease you, Alfie. So G. Richardson on Amazon says, gloomy plot with dislikable characters that it's impossible to care about even when the author is killing them off in nasty ways.
I think that's even kind because I don't think they're even killed off in nasty ways. They're just not. They're very rarely killed off. A bunch of characters die at the end, but not even like the ones that we've been like grown to care about. I don't really remember any like significant characters dying at the end. Is that right?
I always keep that for the spoilers bit, to be fair.
Whatever.
But no, I disagree. I think there was a fair few deaths. But the problem is because what we are seeing is characters that you're not invested in.
Yeah.
And the characters that we are invested in, it's hard to actually invest in them.
Yeah.
Another one of the reviews is from...
I could have written this myself.
Mike Trebor. The main character is self-obsessed, immature girl on speed who never stops talking and allows no space for either a storyline to develop or expand. And I agree with this next point.
100% agree with that.
The other characters are only names with no depth.
Absolutely.
And that's so true because Orion and Elle, I think, are really the only characters that are fleshed out. Leo and the other best friend whose name I cannot remember at this moment.
Amy, Ashley, and it's an A name.
Anya?
Anya Son. Something. It's a stupid
name. You can't call someone's name stupid.
It's not a stupid name.
It's a name that we can't remember right now.
Yeah.
But I think that those may be the only 3 characters that are like properly fleshed out. But there's a lot going on in this book. We're going to get into slight spoiler territory. I'm going to talk about the scene in which I really started to like this book as well. But if you are listening to this so far and you're like, maybe I won't like it, maybe I shouldn't read it, the answer is you probably shouldn't because
don't read it.
it's one of those books where you actually have to invest your time into enjoying. And you know what? Maybe we're wrong because Amazon is a 4.5 star overall, but I think that maybe that's because if I was like Elle's age reading this book, I probably would love it because Elle and I would have the same view of the world. I know that I was definitely very much like hated everything when I was a teenager. So I don't know if that's something that would have translated. So maybe it's a younger audience. It just said fiction on it. It didn't say specifically like young teen. So it is on Amazon. It's teen and young adult coming of age. It's 150 in coming of age fantasy, and it's 163 in just coming of age.
When you're writing fantasy, or you're writing science fiction, or you're writing genre fiction where specific world building elements are affecting the plot, if you write those elements outside of when they're affecting the plot, readers generally struggle to remember them because they're not important in the moment that you're being told about them. So, for instance, we hear a lot about mals and maleficers before mals and maleficers are really in the situation.
Yeah.
The same thing. We also kind of often hear about things after the time. The one scene where that doesn't happen is the scene that you're going to talk about, and was like, this is actually good writing. This makes sense. I'm learning about a particular part of this world as it's important, and I'm learning the thing about it as it's being told to me, and so I can make tangible connection, like world building, plot, smush them together, fantasy.
Yeah.
That's it. In this book, Elle is constantly info dumping information about the world in ways where it's just like, right, we're going to lunch now and we're going to sit down, and now I'm going to spend 4 or 5 pages info dumping about this particular world building element, and now we're back at lunch talking about nothing for about 4 or 5 more pages, and now I'm going to info dump about this other thing, and nothing feels like it connects to the next thing. And because it's told in such teenager drone, it all just feels so disconnected and weird that I spent huge portions of this book just reading it and being like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm supposed to be taking in. I don't know what is important information, what's throwaway information, because nothing ever has any tangible reason for being told at the moment of which it's being told. Often those elements come in later, but they're not told like, this is happening right now. Our character is faced with this thing, so I'm going to tell you about this thing right now. It's often like Elle just kind of offhand mentions something and then just goes into this big exploration about what that thing is whilst she's just sat at lunch and nothing is happening to do with that thing. And I just found that so irritating because I couldn't keep up with what was going on.
Yeah, I agree. If we get into spoilers territory, I've got a couple of quotes that I would like to read you, and also I would like to talk about the scene that we've hinted at throughout the first 2/3 of the podcast.
Yeah.
Firstly, the scene that really sold me on the book.
Yes. And it is a good scene. You gotta give it to Naomi Novik on this particular part of the book. This is a good scene.
Elle is in the library.
We are in spoilers, by the way.
Yes, this is spoiler territory. We are in the library. Orion has found this group of people just outside the library who need super amounts of help. There are mouths everywhere.
Yeah.
So Orion and Elle are in there together, and Orion disappears, and Elle's like, oh my god, I need to go and help him, and I need to go, I don't know how, because something I've failed to mention throughout this book so far, Elle is learning the whole learning thing is so wild.
It's so weird. It's so unnecessarily weird.
But every time Elle is trying to learn a spell, because she's trying to learn it, but she specializes in this world destruction kind of magic. She, for instance, if she's going to clean the floor, it will be she has to destroy everything to clean the floor. Everything will get destroyed with their cleaning power. I think it's really difficult to explain it.
Because it's difficult to explain because it doesn't make any bloody sense. Well, and Naomi Novik has come up with a magic system that is so bizarre and so convoluted that I think she even struggles to describe it as she's writing it. And so when it comes to understanding it as a reader, I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Right at the start of the book, she talks about how she has to, she tries to get the spell to clean the floor, and she says something really weird. I can't remember what it is, but it's she gets a spell to clean the floor, but it's not a spell to clean the floor. It's a different spell which she then has to use to clean the floor. And then there's the whole languages thing as well. It was just so confusing.
So you have to learn languages at the school as well, because you can only learn spells in those languages.
Yeah.
But if you have a spell in Arabic and you're learning Arabic, then the school will give you more spells in Arabic to learn. But then if you need to go off a language that's similar to Arabic, but it isn't Arabic, and you start learning that one by accident, then you're going to get spells that you don't understand in that language.
Yeah.
And it's very much you are inconvenienced by the smallest thing that you do wrong in the school or do differently.
Yeah, and the school is weirdly conscious in itself. It's a conscious being.
Which leads me on to this point.
Yes.
So we're in the library, and Elle is trying to follow Orion out, but the library is shifting and changing. It's the school is trying to keep her in there, and we're not entirely sure why. And then Elle walks into a moor mouth, which is a hideous, massive creature that is made up of a ton of different humans. I am very good at imagining worlds and fantasy and things like that, but for some reason, I cannot get my head around what this creature would look like. I know what it is in spirit, but I've Googled it as well, and I can't actually find an interpretation of this creature, and I think it is because this is something that Naomi Novik has come up with herself.
Yeah.
It's very D&D though. Like,
yeah, I felt like
I think Moors are a thing in D&D. MAW, Moors.
Yeah, I just like imagine like the blob, but it's got like human bits sticking off of it.
That's kind of where I ended up sitting. And this Moormouth is a creature that is like, if you see one of these things, you are dead. Like, there is no way you're going to survive.
No chance.
And the only way that Elle is aware of that you can kill this thing is to basically go in its mouth and choke it. Like
you give it indigestion to the point where like it can't breathe or whatever it does.
Yeah.
And it like kills itself by your being in it.
Exactly. And Elle realizes that she is the only person who is here. She needs to stop this creature coming after the other students. At this point, I think she's like started to really feel those friendships. She doesn't want them, but she's starting to feel them. And therefore she's like, well, you know what? I'm a horrible person anyway. I may as well just go and sacrifice myself.
Just as a note as well, in this particular scene, Elle says, that's a Moormouth. Here is when I remember my dad or someone telling me, oh yeah, of course, that's that whole thing.
Yeah.
My dad and whoever telling me this is how you kill a Moormouth, and she's describing it to us, and we're getting that information about a Moormouth in that moment.
And you're paying attention.
And you're paying attention. That stuff sticks in your head. That's good writing. I just don't understand why she didn't do that for the rest of the book. Bizarre.
I think that it may have been because there wasn't too much of a storyline. Like, the book was just like
no story.
It was like, this is point A, this is point B, this is point C, which is the end. Like, in fairness to the book, it could have been a lot shorter and be punchier.
Yeah. Do you know what? If this was like a 98-page short story novella thing about a moody teenager in a crappy school that is trying to kill her, I would have been like, oh yeah, this is great. But a 300-page novel with no story, rubbish.
Elle goes into the mouth of this Moormouth to try and fight it. And suddenly, like, something pings in her brain a little bit as well. So she remembered this story about her dad. Her dad died, I think.
Yeah, her dad died saving her mum
from this Moormouth.
From a Moormouth.
Not this one, sorry.
But she says it could have been this one.
Yes.
Because she doesn't know. Because he died in the school on graduation day.
Yes, you're right.
And he saves both Elle's mum and Elle's dad meet in the school. They,
yes, because she was pregnant.
She was pregnant in the school.
In the school.
Because that's what they've been doing. And so graduation day comes. They have to run through the graduation hall, which is where all the mouths are. They're fighting them off. And right as they're about to get to the exit, this Moormouth comes out of nowhere. And Elle's dad is like, save yourself, save the baby, get out. I will stop the Moormouth. And the last thing that Elle's mum sees of her dad is him being like chomped by this Moormouth. And that's the end of it. And Elle says, it could be this Moormouth. Again, great stuff.
Yeah, brilliant.
Really tangible, like in the moment. All this stuff is, all of this story about Elle's backstory and her mum's backstory. It's all coming because it's all like relevant in this moment. Good writing.
There are also two other Moormouths that they know about called Patience and Fortitude, which I think is very funny because that's a thing. I can't go into details because I can't remember it off the top of my head. But incidentally, whatever book I was reading straight after this one, there was two characters mentioned called Patience and Fortitude, which were like part of a myth or a legend or something like that.
Sure.
But Patience and Fortitude are two of these Moormouths that are known to hang out in this graduation hall. This Moormouth isn't one, and that's what sends Elle panicking because she's like, this is a third one. That's
huge,
really big. So she goes into this, and I fell in love with it a little bit at this moment because she's gone in and she's like, she's feeling all of the death and that, but instead of it just being like a mesh of like body parts, these humans that are making up this Moormouth are kind of semi-conscious.
They're
as well.
Aware of what's happening to them. Yeah.
At least that's what Elle alludes to, is the fact that she for some reason, instead of giving it indigestion, and I might have been reading this bit too fast because I actually really was into this bit, but she goes into the space and she's like, no, instead of giving it indigestion, I'm going to try and kill it. And she just is flinging out all of these killing spells.
All of her, like, ultra powerful, the
Powerful.
stuff she said she'd never use. Like, her ultimate world-ending spells.
Yeah, and she says, like, this would wipe out the entire room. But she goes into the Moormouth and it's killing, like, one of these humans at a time.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's almost like it's impacted by the size of it or like whatever. So she's sending out all these killing spells, and it's such a good piece of literature because she's like sending them out and she's feeling like the stress and the heaviness of the fact that she's killing all of these humans. And it's like it goes on and it goes on and it doesn't stop for a long time.
Yeah, a good while. It is good.
And she takes on this heaviness of the fact that she's killing all these humans, but she's like, well, actually, it's probably a good thing because they don't want to be part of this Moormouth.
Absolutely. She's, it's merciful what she's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like that was such a good piece of writing that I needed to just continue the book. And in all honesty, if we weren't reading this for the podcast and I hadn't got to that bit, I don't think I'd have finished the book. It's like you with A Handmaid's Tale. You kept going because of the podcast.
And this book, I kept going because of the podcast. Absolutely.
For me, this is the first one we've read, and I've been like, aside from Handmaid's Tale, aside from that, the first one I've read where I've been like, I actually have to get through this. But at that point, I was like, right, no, perfect. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to read through to the end of the book. And I'm really glad I did. As I say, I can't wait to read the next one. But aside, like when I'm sat there convincing Alfie to at least get to this point before he stops reading, why is that like the case? And why is this book sitting on 4.5 stars with 15,000 ratings? Like, that's mad. That's so many ratings for this book.
It is crazy.
57% of them
majority
are 5-star.
of them are 5-star.
I think this is nothing like other magical books. I don't love the magical elements of this too much, but that's because I feel like I was forced into it and I wasn't sort of like gently taken through it and then got it. It was just like, which I actually really like this, and I think I've said it on the podcast before, is I really like it when you are just like brought into the world and you're not sort of like handheld and spoon-fed. But this needed that. This needed that so much because I really struggled to understand everything, even to the point in which if you had asked me halfway through the book what everything meant, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. It's only because I read the whole thing, I was like, and I don't think that's the point. I think you're meant to get it straight away. But again, I'm not a massive fantasy reader, so keep that in mind. What really I laughed when I got to this part of the book. It's 18% of the way through, and I audibly laughed out loud. And I remember saving this highlight, and I was like, I have to read this to Alfie because this is just like, this is too much. But you were supportive of this.
What?
You were supportive of this. So
oh yeah, when I actually got to it, I was like, okay, I can kind of, because so I'm way back. I'm basically like page 2 in the book, and where is this?
18%, 51.
So page 51. I'm page 2, and I'm like, whoa, this is already. I'm like, I don't like this. And Ashley's like, well, I don't think you're going to like it anymore. Here's a quote from page 51, that I just can't stop laughing at. And I was like, okay, well, tell me what it is.
So this quote is, she's just basically spoken to Orion and said, please tell me you aren't trying to go out with me. Like, trying to be like, leave me alone. We're not going to get into a romantic anything. And she then carries on. It didn't seem likely. No one ever has, as in tried to go out with her. It's not that I'm ugly. On the contrary, I've been growing increasingly beautiful in a tall and alarming way, as befits the terrible dark sorceress I'm meant to be. At least until I presumably collapse into a grotesque crone. And I don't know what it was about that writing, but it felt very sanctimonious. It felt very much like she's saying all these really horribly critical things about herself, and then there's this, which isn't like the same sort of matter-of-fact way that she's been talking about herself as being like this horrible person, but it's like, actually, no, I'm going to elegantly talk about how wonderful I am.
It's that kind of...
And it just was a bit jarring.
Yeah, it's that... the thing that I like, having got to that point and I read that, I was like, Naomi Novik, say what you like, but I think she does. I work with teenagers, right? And when I read that, I remember thinking, she has captured the kind of glass arrogance that teenagers have, where they do think they're the most amazing and important things in the world, but simultaneously also think that they are so terrible.
Yeah.
And like the tiniest thing just shatters them. And when I got to that, I was like, do you know what? I kind of buy it. And I did, when I read that, I was like, if the whole book was written in that weird tongue-in-cheek sort of way, which I think Naomi Novik probably thought that she had done it like that, but that quote is funny, and I think it's written as a joke, and it's supposed to be funny.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be.
And the rest of the book is not funny; it's just boring. But I read that, and I was like, okay, maybe if I read it with this quote in mind, and I read it like she's trying to write it like this, I'll get more out of it. That lasted about 2 pages for me, and I was back to thinking, God, I hate this. But yeah.
One moment that, again, I thought it was a really good piece of writing. Later on, as we were talking about through the graduation hall, we said we're going to come back to this bit. I'm going to go over it as quickly as I can because I am aware that this podcast is getting on a bit. But they basically, as we were talking about, the graduation hall, they need to kind of find a way to clear it before the graduates go out this year. And they find that there's like a mechanism that they can fiddle with and basically fix and get everything going. And they get this group together of extremely talented people to go out, basically cast a sort of ward to make sure that they can get into this space safely and keep away the mouths that are going to get them. And they've got some people who are like really technically minded so they can go into the mechanism and fix it. They go down there. One of the main characters at this point, I say main characters, one of the characters that she's got semi-close to does die in this moment. And we are sort of like, I think this is probably the first time where I was like, oh no, actually it's real. Like the threat is real because everyone's just managing to kill these mouths. We've heard a lot about people who have died, but we've not really experienced it in like our sort of main cast. So at this point I was like, oh, okay. And she writes a statement that sort of just like pinged to me as something that was like so deep and true. And I don't know if this is because I've been in a situation where I've felt similar things, but she said, as long as I didn't look, she didn't have to be dead, which I just thought was very true. And then, and I didn't have to have feelings about Ellen beaming at me 2 days ago while she told me we were going to make it. And then she goes on to say, like, I couldn't afford feelings right now. And it's very like this moment of like intense sadness and pain. And she's like, no, I have to turn it off. And that's very rare for Elle as well, because she doesn't connect with people. And at this point in the book, she's just started to, and she's sort of like rewarded by one of the closer people that she's with just dying.
I don't remember that character.
No, I don't either,
I don't
sadly.
know who Ellen is.
But like the whole idea of like, if you're not paying it, like if you don't think about it, they're not dead.
Yeah.
I really liked that, and I actually don't like it as much as I did when I highlighted it. But I at the time it
got you.
It got me enough that I highlighted it. Overall, this book is not very
good.
My taste. I think you could argue that it's not very good, but
I am arguing.
There are 15,000 Amazon reviews that would say otherwise.
I'll fight them all.
I think that if you want to go and read this book, please do. I think Mike has already said that he's planning on reading the second one as well. Mm-hmm. So, and also if you listen to it in audiobook form, I think it would come across a lot more the way it's supposed to, with the sort of like light-hearted, snarky sarcasm that maybe just doesn't come across in written form. Mike loved it and he listened to it as well.
Okay. So, well, yeah, maybe then.
Maybe that's what it is as well. I mean, I liked it enough to read the second one. Yeah, I think Alfie's taking this extremely hard. I think I'm very metered on this one. But Let us know what you think if you've read it in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are listening on Spotify, please use the comment box. Tell us what you think of this part, this episode, this podcast episode. I will read the second one and I'll talk about it probably later in the year at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a very exciting episode coming up next. Have you got anything else you want to say about A Deadly Education?
No, it's rubbish. Don't read it.
And on those words. But we're going to do something a bit different for the next episode. So for June 22nd is when the next podcast episode is coming out. Alfie, what are we doing?
We are going to be talking generally, I guess, about books that we like, books that we're reading, books that we're going to read, and just generally just talking about our reading outside of the podcast, I think.
Yeah.
But we might still talk about some books that we've talked about in the podcast. It's going to be a bit more of a just general book discussion.
I think it will be talking about books from outside the podcast. I want to try and focus it on the last 6 months, so from January to the podcast date. However, I will almost definitely mention Stranded, because I can't seem to go for a podcast without mentioning.
To be fair,
that I really like Stranded.
I didn't like it, and I still can't stop thinking about it. So
let us know if you want us to do any kind of like mini episode on Stranded as
well.
Yeah. But thank you so much for listening or watching wherever you are. It's been a pleasure. I hope you feel some kind of satisfaction about being able to vent your hatred of this book.
Yeah, it's so bad.
I don't think it was that bad, but also, as always, it's one of those ones where the tagline is a TikTok sensation, and I think.
Well,
it's not the books I'm seeing.
Lattes was a TikTok sensation, and that book was incredible.
I'm reading a lot of TikTok sensation books. This one hasn't come up on my TikTok, and a lot of the other ones have, and I think that tells you a lot.
I'm well in on fantasy book talk.
And it's not come up for you.
And it hasn't come up for me once.
I have a slight conspiracy that's because they're not actually TikTok sensations, and it's just a marketing ploy.
My conspiracy was that the TikTok people read it and thought it was rubbish.
I'm excited to see your TikTok clips of it.
I'm not making anything. I'm not giving this book any more than it's already got. Those 50,000 reviews is enough.
If you have any suggestions for books you want to see us read in July, make sure you leave that commented down below as well, because as always, we pick a book that we're going to be reading out of 2 possible choices at the end of every episode. Next month isn't that, because, as we say, we're going to do our sort of like around the podcast reading episode, and I'm very excited about that. I hope you are too.
Me too, yeah, definitely.
So we'll see you in that episode. But for right now, thank you so much for watching. I've been Ashleigh.
I've been Alfie.
And we will see you in the next episode of the Paperback Possibility Podcast. See ya!